Sweet. All right. Welcome back to another episode of Wicked Energy with JG. I'm here in Zoomland with Ryan Walker, Senior Vice President, Federal Affairs at Shumaker Advisors. Ryan, welcome to the show. How you doing today, buddy?
Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. I like interviewing people from outside of Houston. It always gives some very unique perspective, especially, you're coming. I'm assuming, are you in Washington, D.C. right now?
Yeah, I'm in the DC area. Yeah.
DC area.
I
Okay.
live in Virginia. So kind of in my home office space here.
Nice, nice. Well, I have to say, I respect the man who dresses up and he's got a tie on. And, I oftentimes wish I published the video because and not because of how I look most of the time. It's for the guests who come on. They usually look pretty dapper. And I'm sitting here in my home office with a baseball cap on and a sweater with my daughter's drawings in the background, and if anyone's been on the podcast or in a meeting with me for work, they know, the ins and outs of this home office here, which is highly decorated with my daughter's artwork. So,
I love it. I love it.
funny story. So when, before COVID, she'd come to the office and she'd come visit, if she had some time before it was in elementary school, and she was, "Oh, Daddy, this stuff has to go on the wall so all your work friends can see it." And so, of course, good dad, I couldn't say no. So then by the time COVID was, right before we had, gone into lockdown, my whole office was just like every wall front to back was filled with my daughter's artwork. And then when we came during COVID to the pandemic, lockdowns, everything else, everyone's working. Well, she's like, "Well, no one can see my artwork anymore. So I need to now put it on the wall at home." And it's funny because if you were in my home office right now, the only place there's artwork is behind the screen. So like nowhere else has artwork because she wants to make sure everyone who's work friends gets to see her artwork. And so
That's
yeah,
right.
it's funny. You'd think it all over the place, but it's only so people can see it. But anyway, this is not a podcast about home offices, but I'm curious. So do you spend a lot of time working from home then, or just it kind
Yeah.
of depends?
So my firm, we don't right now we don't have a physical office in DC.
Okay.
I think we're working on getting one.
Okay.
But right now, so I spend kind of, I do my administrative kind of my work that I do out of my home office, but majority of my time is I'll go into DC and just and spend on Capitol Hill or in different meetings. So really, a lot what I do is a people business. I joke with people, I get paid to talk.
I like that.
Yeah, so it's basically we're just, I'm on Capitol Hill quite a bit, meeting with staffers and members of Congress and going to different agencies, whether it be EPA, DOI, different things like that, to
Okay.
advocate on clients' behalfs. And it's you Zoom is good, but it's only good to a point. You can't creating that personal relationship in a one-on-one in-person setting, there's no substitute for that.
I agree. And I think we went through an interesting sort of transition of going from, where working from home was kind of taboo, pandemic hits, everyone adjusts, everyone's, "Oh, we could do this now forever. Like working from home is it. That's it. We're never going back to an office. All these office spaces are going to be, empty. And what are we going to do with all this commercial space?" Well, then now to where like people are itching, or at least a lot of people, and again, I'm speaking in generalities here, but for the most part, people are like, "Man, we really like being back in front of people talking." And from like when in a corporate environment, it's impossible to build culture on Zoom, right? Like it's just
Mm-hmm.
there's a bit of you kind of hit a limit on terms of the relationships and the
Yeah.
dynamics that you can build. And so like you, I mean, I'm in a business where I'm in sales, business development, and then the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm a people's person, and I much rather do these types of things in person. But fortunately, we kind of get the best of both worlds, and as long as we can leverage technology, it has its benefits, right? I think productivity wise, it certainly has increased it on some levels. And so again, we adapt or we die. And I think as at least here in the US, we've adapted quite well to the whole technology and virtual conference and meeting type environment. But anyway, so we're sitting here, it's almost Thanksgiving. I mean, are you guys sticking around Washington? What's that look like for you and the family?
So my family and I, my wife, I have two kids. I have a 13-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son, and
Nice.
We are headed down to Fort Myers, Florida, to visit my in-laws for
Beautiful.
Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So, I mean, I got to ask, what's the favorite dish on the menu for you?
Well, my wife is of Hungarian descent, so
Ooh, nice.
my mother-in-law always makes me something kind of a different Hungarian dish. I never quite know what it is or what to expect, but it's always fantastic.
So, what's a typical Hungarian dish, if you could
Lot
describe it?
Very heavy.
Okay.
Lot,
They eat well, huh?
yeah, lots of bread, butter,
Beautiful.
potatoes.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Okay. Well, let's so I was at the barbershop actually yesterday and we were talking about Thanksgiving because I'm from Canada. Half of my family's from Ukrainian, the other half is from like France and Germany. And so he was asking, was like, well, what's a typical Ukrainian dish? And they have this, it's this bread. And so, for the Eastern European folks, we eat pretty heavily as well. And I can identify with a lot of the breads and the butters because that's what I grew up on. And it's probably why I'm a little leaner now than I was growing up because my wife doesn't quite cook like that. But the holidays are a great time. I mean, it's
Mhm.
now that we've gone through elections, we kind of see where everything lies. Lots to look forward to. And so, but before we keep going on the conversation for the audience, I do want to remind everyone listening that I'm currently opening up sponsorship opportunities. So if any energy focused companies are looking to increase brand marketing, visibility, and messaging, please reach out. I'd love to work with you and we'll figure something out. So Ryan, are you originally from Washington, D.C., or where are you from?
No, I was born and raised in Ohio, Northwest Ohio, a small town called Defiance.
Okay.
Um,
Can I say go Buckeyes? Is that a thing?
yes, go
Okay.
Buckeyes.
Nice.
That's it. That
Okay.
is a thing. It's funny. It's if you're either have gone to Ohio State or you've grown up in Ohio, and generally you root for the Buckeyes. I mean, so there are some like in Northern Ohio where I'm from. You're close to the Michigan border. You can get people who root for that team up north, who we won't mention. Um,
Okay.
but it's generally pretty Ohio State heavy.
Nice. Okay, good. And so, I mean, what's it like growing up in Ohio? I mean, what's there to do around there?
So I grew up my growing up. My dad was a police officer in my hometown. He was, and ultimately, when I was in high school, he was chief of police. Um,
Okay.
so I grew up in a bit of a fishbowl, but it is typically, I mean, it's an agriculture, based manufacturing based community. It's as flat as a tabletop with row
Okay.
crops as far as you can see. Industry. GM has a huge foundry there. Johns Manville, who makes fiberglass insulation, has a number of different factories there. But very, very manufacturing and agriculture heavy.
Okay, cool. And so I got to ask, what's it like being a son to a chief of police? I mean, were you on your P's and Q's and were your friends like scared or either made strategic relationships with you to make sure they could maybe get a little help if something happened? Or, I
Well,
mean, what does that
that's
look
fun.
like?
Oh, it's funny you asked. I mean, a lot of my friends thought, oh, we have Ryan as a friend, so we get a get out of jail free card.
Yeah, of
No,
course, man.
absolutely not. No, it was you get in trouble twice as much card if So I always knew if you get in trouble somewhere else, it's you get in trouble twice as much at home.
I
So
bet, man.
it was no, it was good. My dad is now retired, and he's he had a great career, and
Awesome.
still involved in the community.
Great. No, nothing but the utmost respect for anyone involved with law enforcement. I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine being that type of environment day in and day out. So a big shout out to your dad there, Ryan. That's highly commendable. So kind of taking a step back, 30,000 foot view, looking at everything. I always like to ask the question to get to know someone just a little more, and you may have known this was coming, but what does an ideal Friday night look like for you? If you had all the money in the world, you could spend it with whoever, you could teleport. If you could just paint a picture of what that would look like, what is the ideal Friday night for Ryan Walker?
So it's interesting you ask. So in I'm a lobbyist, and people think, oh, you're very extroverted, and you just want to be around people all the time. Well, not really. I tell people I'm a professional extrovert,
Mm,
and get paid to talk. And so on a Friday night, my wife is quite the opposite. Like she's just extroverted, period, which I
okay.
love.
Yeah.
Um, but for me, it's just being at home or being around a fire out back in the backyard. And I love wine, so
Okay.
good glass of wine.
Interesting. Okay. So you're talking about fire. Are you roasting marshmallows, hot dogs, or just watching the fire? I mean, what, I
Well,
mean,
we're the kids are making s'mores.
yeah.
We make they have this sandwich thing that they put bread in and put it over the fire and it cooks
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Um, so we do it all. I love the outdoors. So anytime I can be outdoors, I fly fish. I like
Oh,
to hunt.
nice.
I don't. So I tell people, look, I golf is not my thing, and I hunt and I fish, and that's about it.
Good for you. Where do you typically go hunting when up there?
So I mean, there's I've been deer hunting in Virginia and Oklahoma, in
Mm,
Ohio, pheasant hunting in Virginia, pheasant hunting in Ohio, and I guess deer and pheasant are kind of the the big things. Now this is like I'm self-aware enough to know like these aren't wild pheasant. They're like, hey, we're gonna go stick these birds in a field,
yeah.
and then
Yeah.
and then 30 minutes we're gonna send you out with a guide and a dog.
Nice.
Uh,
Well, that's kind of how hunting is nowadays. I mean, I'm in upstream oil and gas industry, and so and in oil field services. So a lot of what we do is relationship management, which involves
mhm.
a lot of hunting, fishing, everything else in between. And so yeah, it's funny because you go take customers to a deer lease or a ranch or something, and it's all high fence. They
Yeah,
put these animals in there, and you go sit in the stand, and within a couple hours, you're killing some exotic, and you got this beautiful meat in the mount, and it's kind of set up for success. There's not
yeah.
not too much hunting involved. I don't even like to call it hunting. I've done it once, and I actually I've never was able to get anything. Um, but I respect it. I think it's great, and especially if you can get your own meat. To me, I mean, I'm a health and fitness buff, so anytime you can get some good quality meat in the freezer, I think that's a huge win. So,
Absolutely.
um, but that's really interesting. And don't worry, folks, we are going to talk about energy here in a minute. But I don't know Ryan. I'm trying to get to know him, and just like everyone else is. So, let's shift into energy mode here a little bit. Again, kind of a thoughtful question is what core belief around energy have you changed your mind on over the last few years? Does anything come to mind with the transition, politics? I mean, have you been able to kind of reframe anything and look at something through a different lens?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, um, I I worked on Capitol Hill for 14 years as a senior staffer, and then went to lobby in house for an oil major, and so a lot of the talk has been about oil and gas production, refining capacity, and then a lot of talk on the ether about climate change. Um, you can have this is one area where I believe you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have a robust oil and gas industry and you can deal effectively with climate change. There's nothing to say that those are mutually exclusive. And that's something that I've evolved on, so to speak, because I was very much in the, you know, we don't have to worry about climate change. Let's just produce oil and gas, kind of the drill baby drill type ethos.
Yeah.
Um, but you can walk and chew gum at the same time in this area. Um, and I think now we're seeing the necessity of doing that with everything going on in Ukraine, the price of oil, and just the kind of the energy sector globally. We have to do both, and we have to do both well.
No, that's great, and it's interesting. That conversation I'm seeing and hearing a lot more. I mean, again, being here in Houston, we're heavily influenced by oil and gas. Clearly, a lot of different energy verticals as well. But tech and climate tech is also something that is starting to emerge. And something else that I actually was listening to this morning, there's a great podcast, Dan Pickering and Josh Lowry from Upright Digital. They have a podcast and they were interviewing oh, what is her name? She's from BP Ventures. I'm drawing a blank, but she originally from China, came over here, has worked for BP forever, and she's
Mm.
on the investment side. And she's really, focused on, the conversation was simply, yes, we can as oil and gas, as the oil and gas industry, we can also be part of the solution, contributing to effective climate change, or effective climate sort of uh initiatives to help reduce the impact of oil and gas, or just all the other sort of things that have contributed to a lot of the issues that we are experiencing with climate change. And she made a lot of just very interesting points from someone that's worked at BP for so long, who's now making a good push and transition, investing a lot back into the renewable space. And it's just really neat to see these conversations had. And it's unfortunate because a lot of times you get the extreme on both ends that are the loudest, but most people kind of are somewhere in the middle saying, hey, let's all kind of work together. Like you said before we started recording, have all of the above sort of mentality. Because when you look at just the fundamentals, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out, is like the demand is there for oil and gas. Like we can't just
Yeah.
flip a switch, right? Which I think that's been told a lot. Everyone understands, but I think to just continue having conversations, hopefully it reaches the further ends of the spectrum to where the extremes don't necessarily have as much of a voice, because I think that's where a lot of the divisiveness comes from. And I mean, most of the people that I speak with that are somewhat educated in the space are having very healthy, constructive conversations around this, but it's the ones
Yeah.
who don't necessarily have the, I guess, awareness or education around just even the basic fundamentals of energy are raising arms and splashing spaghetti on, or what, what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
anti-oil thing, and which I just is crazy. But anyway, like,
The words
again,
matter.
yeah. So what,
Words matter. And look,
yeah.
you talk about the transition. I would say, look, you talk about all of the above, right? All of the above. When I was on the Hill, we talked about that in the early, well, mid 2000s, 2010, things like that. And that's become very cliche with, a certain political party, the Republicans, right? They talk about all of the above quite a bit, which they should, and it's good. But words matter, and I think it's more of, I would argue it's not a transition. What transition, suggests that we're moving away from one thing and going to another.
Sure.
I would say I like the term energy expansion, because we're expanding the scope of what the global energy scene looks like. Whether it's moving away from coal to natural gas, or utilizing natural gas and doing steam methane reforming and creating hydrogen and sequestering the carbon.
Mm.
There's a lot there, and we're expanding how we think about energy, because we're never going to transition away from oil and gas, because the clothes that you and I wear, the tires, everything is revolves around a petrochemical need in this society and the economy that we live in. So petrochemicals are always going to be there, unless we're all going to go and wear burlap and walk everywhere.
Right. Or unless we start moving backwards
Right.
in the way we've evolved. Right. And the reality is too, is, there's a lot of non-OECD countries that only wish they could have access to the
Right.
things we do. And so as, emerging economies get from where they're at to very industrialized, and start, producing and manufacturing and increasing their GDP, well, then naturally energy demand is going to continue to go up, and
Mm.
all these products and chemicals and everything else, the demand is going to be there. So yeah, so I would certainly agree with that. And I really, especially, sitting in your on your side of the fence in the politics, and sort of being on the front line of policy and legislation and stuff like that. It's awesome to hear that, because I don't know, if, to be honest, if I've ever spoken to someone from that side of the country who represents that. And so I love that your sort of thought behind it, because I'm sure you're shouting from the mountaintops to folks all throughout, that part of the country as well. And so I'm curious, Ryan, is this something that you've always been interested in? I mean, looking at your background, you've got, your journey started, way back when, and you've worked for companies like BP, George Washington University, House of Representatives. So is this something as a child you were interested in, or talk a little bit about how you got into all this? Because I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, no, I never, Justin, I never thought I would be in politics. I never thought I would be where I am right now. I told you my dad was chief of police growing up. I had every intention of going into law enforcement. I never wanted to do kind of
Ah,
the local or state law enforcement. I always wanted to go federal. And when I came out of college, I applied to kind of the alphabet soup of federal agencies, right? But I really wanted to be a DEA special agent.
ah,
I wanted to kick indoors and take bad guys and drugs off the street,
yeah.
and I got a conditional offer of employment from the DEA, pending background checks and all that kind of stuff.
Mm,
And then DEA ended up going on a hiring freeze, and that evaporated. That opportunity evaporated, and all the other kind of cornucopia of federal agencies said, "Well, thanks, but you either don't have any experience or you don't have a master's degree." And I was like, "Well, all right, I think I need to go get a master's degree." So
mm,
I came out and went to George Washington University for my graduate work, and started working then for my now late Congressman Paul Gilmore, who was my hometown congressman. Um, and through the 3 years, I thought I was going to graduate grad school, go back to Ohio, and become a federal law enforcement officer. But I started to kind of rise through the ranks, pretty quickly in the office, and I was like, wow, you know, this is the path. And it's funny. It's like they always say, you know, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plan. And
right. Yeah.
he certainly had a different path for me.
Wow. No, that's fascinating. Because I mean, again, the guy's grown up from Ohio, and like you said, in your environment, you weren't really exposed to energy like someone say from like Houston, Dallas,
Yeah,
or some of these places, and a lot of times, if parents are involved in energy, then naturally through osmosis, you kind of get a little taste, and whether either you run away from it or you gravitate towards it. But no, I think that's really fascinating. So again, in the chair that you sit in, on that side of energy, what do you suspect is the biggest challenge that you feel exists within the energy landscape that may inhibit our progress towards a lot of the goals and stuff that we've set in place? Let's just call it domestically here.
permitting reform.
Ah,
That is a huge topic now on Capitol Hill and in kind of the policy realms. You had the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which passed earlier this year, and then more recently you had the Inflation Reduction Act, which all kind of included a lot of energy components in them. But and you can have all that, and that's well and good. But if you don't have permitting reform, you're never going to get these things built for 7 to 10 years or maybe more. You
mm,
have a lot of these regulatory hurdles that create uh, process slowdowns, and process hurdles, and generate litigation, and it's just it's out of control. We need to, and I think that there are smart people on both sides of the aisle. Captain McMorris Rogers from the state of Washington, who's likely to chair the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and you have Senator Joe Manchin in the Senate, that are looking at this and see the need for it. Because if we're going to progress with the energy expansion, if we're going to progress with making sure that we're producing enough for the demand out there, we have to have process reform, permitting
mm.
reform. We haven't had a refinery built in this country since 1977, and
No
gasoline
kidding.
demand isn't going down.
Right. That's so, kind of to add to the question. It's I sometimes I feel like I'm in a bit of in a bubble, right? I'm here in Houston. in the echo chamber of like what we really need, and like how are these policies making any sense, and this and that. But so the question, I say that to say, what kind of exposure, or like, let's just, for instance, and this is an educating piece for me as well, but like, so President Joe Biden, or any president for that matter, how much educating on like energy, like the true fundamentals of energy and economics, do they get sort of exposed to make certain decisions? And can you kind of explain like the workflow on how that works? Because like a lot of times when again, on either side of whether it's red, blue, regardless, but let's just say whoever Mr. or Mrs. President is, like, are they getting properly educated in this space? Or if not, like, why not? Or are they influenced based on whatever, like the next vote or something? Like, again, I'm coming from Canada, so I don't have like a deep understanding a lot of times of like why we're doing things. So again, I don't know if that makes sense, my question, but sometimes things get said to the country and I scratch my head. I'm like, how is someone in your position, does that make any sense? Like, aren't people educated telling you that that doesn't make sense?
Yeah. So look, you would, I always kind of see the institutions and the levers of our government kind of, maybe I have too much of an altruistic view on it, in the sense that I believe people are doing the right things for the right reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, sometimes there are information gaps. There really are, and there are education gaps, and that's why I think it's important. And representation matters. I think we talked
Mm,
about this before we started recording. And if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. I always like to tell people,
yeah.
and it's kind of a cynical viewpoint, but it's true. I mean, if you're, you need to educate people. You need to, these companies and these industries need to educate people. They need to advocate, because there are so many different things going on in this world, and there's only 435 members of the House and 100 senators, and one
Mm,
president, and there's only so much, and only 24 hours in a day. So there's so much going on. You're competing for attention. You're competing for time. You're trying to rise above the noise.
yeah.
So
Huh.
there's a lot going on, and it's sometimes it's difficult to break through, and I think that's why you know being engaged in the process is important.
Now, it's a great answer, and again, like, you'll have to excuse the ignorance and some of the questions I have, but these, again, I feel like I'm somewhat educated, and but the reality is the general population takes a bunch of headlines, draws conclusions, listens to what's on, two or three different news channels, and then ultimately votes based off of that, which then leads our country into whatever direction. And so yeah, so I was curious. It's like how does that all work? And again, great answer, and appreciate you adding some color to that. Um, let's talk a little bit more about Shoemaker and what you do there. How would you describe what it is you guys offer, and ultimately how that affects whether it's policy or legislation and all the rest of it?
Yeah, so Shumaker Advisors is it's a wholly owned subsidiary of Shumaker Loop and Kendrick, which is a top 200 law firm, based or headquartered in Toledo, Ohio.
Mm,
The firm itself, we have offices in Toledo, Columbus, Ohio, uh, Charlotte, North Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, and then Tallahassee, Tampa, and Sarasota in Florida. So a lot of key states that we're in, but Shoemaker Advisors, we have state level advocacy in Columbus and Tallahassee, and they brought me on to stand up their full time physical presence in Washington. So you know we're here to help our clients, like I said, rise above the noise, break through,
wow.
to have a voice and a seat at the table, because if you're you know policy is never made in a vacuum.
Mm,
So your voice, whoever that voice is, needs to have a strong voice and a consistent voice. So we're helping clients in Washington D.C. Educate about their businesses. We're helping them have a voice in the process, so that policy is not made in that vacuum without their voice, so that they don't have unnecessary hurdles that are added to their process, or their businesses rather, that cost them more time, cost them more money, cost them more headaches, frankly.
Yeah.
Um, and all of these companies, and in the energy sector, they're doing their jobs by running their business. They don't always have the time to be engaged in the policy and the political process. That's the value that we add.
Yeah.
And we come in, and we're not just consultants or lobbyists. We want to be part of uh, the client's team. We want to wear their jersey. We're
Mhm.
there to be heavily integrated in their process.
Interesting. So what type of companies are your clients? Are they just like anybody and anyone, or
Yeah,
who?
we're a multi-client firm. I mean, my personal kind of specialty areas are in the energy area and tech and telecommunications policy. So oil field services, oil and gas producers.
Mm,
We also have clients in the healthcare space. Clients in the transportation space as well. So kind of all over.
okay.
While I've done a lot of work in the energy and the tech and telecom space, I often say I'm a rather than an inch deep in a mile wide, I'm more like a foot deep in a mile wide.
I hear you. No, that's fascinating. It's good to have companies like yourselves, like you say, giving people a voice and allowing them hopefully to have a seat at the table through through what you guys offer. So Ryan, a while back, you sent me some information on the House GOP and the 2023 energy bill, which is a legislative push to try and push production for fossil fuels, low carbon sources like renewables, small nuclear reactors, hydrogen. If they win control of the House in the midterms, well, they did it, right? And so I'm curious, how do you see this playing out, and what can folks expect as this continues to evolve?
Yeah, Justin, I think this is a real exciting time. You have a lot of media out there that are saying, "Oh, Congress and this nation is so divided. There's such partisan acrimony." I think, look, maybe this is a bit of a naive or altruistic view, but I believe in the institutions of the republic, and and I think that you look at there was a Pew Research Center analysis done, it spanned 30 years, right? From 1989 to 1920. And four of the five most productive sessions of Congress, took place while there was divided government. And those policies are more durable. You think of the 1981, the 1986 Reagan tax cuts, welfare reform under President Clinton. All those were done under divided government.
Mm,
So I think that there's great hope coming into this. Now, I'm not going to be so naive to say, look, we're going into a presidential year. Neither party really wants to give the other, too much success, but neither party can also risk going into a presidential election cycle without something to talk about, something to say, look, this is what we've done. And I think this energy bill that could materialize in the next maybe 3 to 6 months will be very important.
mm,
And I think permitting reform will be a huge portion of that. Senator Manchin already had a bill tried to get in this year. There's still talk about maybe doing something in the lame duck session of Congress. I don't know how realistic that really is. I think more will be focused on come January when the new Congress comes in. But with the Republicans taking control of the House, there's kind of really four buckets. From what I can ascertain, where they want to focus, and it's economic growth, oversight, energy, and security. And in those buckets, economic growth, you're looking at reducing government spending, supply chain resiliency,
hmm.
reshoring manufacturing, oversight. There's obviously, we talked about before about the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act, two huge bills to conduct oversight over how that money is being spent
Yeah.
to make sure taxpayers' money is being spent wisely.
Yep.
Energy, we talked about production, increasing production, permitting, and also renewables too are a portion of that. It's in how do we expand hydrogen? How do we expand the electrification of different industries or the transportation sector? And then security. I think that you're going to right out of the gate, you're going to see a House Republican majority deal with security at the southern border,
Mm,
IP security, how we're dealing with China, and then obviously crime and our country right now is under has a fentanyl epidemic,
yeah.
which is frightening.
Yeah.
So
No,
a lot to handle, but look, I'm an optimistic and a hopeful person, and I think that we're gonna see a lot of good things come.
nice. Do you think oftentimes the government just in general gets in its own way to slow down progress instead of just kind of having faith in the private sector? Or I mean, or do you think this will kind of help accelerate it and get us where we need to be?
I think COVID and other geopolitical factors, you know, the the government and the private sector are gonna have to work together.
Mm,
Um, and because one doing, you know, if one hand is doing something and the other doesn't know about it, the whole system it's gonna overcorrect one way or the other. So there has to be this working together, which generally you see that they work pretty well together. But again, that's why representation matters.
right, right. And I'm curious on your thoughts. Recently there's been discussion, and I don't think it's going to pass, about windfall taxes for oil and gas companies. Um, again, sitting on my side of the fence, to me, it only hurts the situation. But perhaps can you explain more on like a sort of an overview as to like what the intent and why that would be implemented, and where sort of I guess, like why government thinks that's a good idea? Do you have any thoughts around that?
So windfall. Look, I could tell you now with the Republican House being a backstop for a lot of what the Biden administration is trying to do, windfall tax is not going to happen.
Sure.
And I think that look, I don't know if anyone frankly thinks that windfall taxes are a good thing. It makes for good political theater. And that's about it.
Yeah, like that's again, I don't, and I respect your answer on that. Clearly it can be a sensitive subject depending on what side of the fence you sit on, but it's I guess it's challenging for me, someone in oil and gas who sees the hard work and what we're able to do, and the efforts that we make to produce, you know, clean barrels, or the cleanest barrels we can. And then, us as an industry, we have our president up there saying, hey, congrats, we're going to help increase production. But you can't make money because you have to make sure all that money that you're making gets put into lowering gas prices at the pump. And then, oh, we're going to heavily tax you. And so it's like I scratch my head, and like it's sometimes hard for me to understand. Like I always try to have enough empathy to at least consider the other side's sort of
Mhm.
intent, whether that's politics or not. Like my
Right.
wife or my buddies, like, what I mean? Like, I always try to say, okay, if I put myself in your shoes, like what's the reason here? And that one I still have a hard time understanding. And again, I'm not expecting you to fully explain it or whatever, but it's just, these are things that just kind of make me scratch my head, and it's frustrating, right? Because like I would love to be able to sit down and be like, can you please explain why this is going to help in the long run? Like, where is this coming? And so
Yeah.
again, that's just me thinking out loud, but hopefully for folks out there, like, and I've had, especially with, since coming out of COVID, we've had an economic roller coaster. Like it's like I I feel bad for people coming out of, graduating high school or college throughout COVID and now having to face this types of environments. Like to get their career started around this time is, I mean, maybe it's opportunity, but uh again, it's just like I've done a lot of, educating, people, because I have a large social circle that has nothing to do with oil and gas. And,
Mhm.
when gasoline prices were skyrocketing, and it's like, man, how come all these companies are making all this expensive gasoline? And it's like, okay, let's get back to the basics here, everybody, like
Mhm.
supply and demand and refining capacity and all this. But even for someone like myself that's in the space, even I have to kind of like really check my information to make sure I'm not spewing something that is inaccurate. So for the general population who doesn't care about energy, and the only thing they care about is their electricity bill and gas prices, yeah, they're going to take what they see over the news and apply that complex topic, which not very many people truly understand, how
Right.
gasoline prices are actually set, uh to where then, yeah, you just, you kind of get people sort of, kind of, it's like the blind leading the blind sometimes.
Yeah, and it's look, they're the oil and gas companies, they're producing a product, right? They're investing capital, producing a product, and just like any company, they should see a profit from it. And it just happens now that, given a lot of other inputs, the price per barrel has been relatively high compared to, the previous, I don't know, 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
And look, the energy industry is I love it. Look, there when I went to work for BP, the last interview I had was with our then U.S. CEO, and he basically came in and said to me, "Look, what we do here is we light, heat, and move the world by providing reliable, affordable, and abundant energy." And that was a mission I got behind. I love it,
Hell yeah.
and I still believe in that.
No, I mean, that's what it's all about, right? It's like, I think the
Yeah,
North Star needs to be, how can we get every single individual on this planet out of energy poverty? And,
exactly.
and I'm not saying like come hell or high water, we'll do it by any means necessary. But like, the reality is, like, if you look at, say, the US, like our CO2, like our emissions with here in the US have slowly gone down, but yet we've produced more energy. And so, like, clearly we're doing something right here,
Hmm.
through technology and innovation and just efforts. You look at Canada, they've been up against some headwinds politically, on the oil and gas side.
Hmm.
And but arguably, even, the dirty oil sands, they actually produce a fairly clean barrel of oil relative to the rest of the world. And so, there's a lot of good debate there. And so it's like, again, or sorry, if you're going to say something.
No, no. So, yeah, where are you from in Canada?
Calgary, Alberta.
Okay. So, during the pandemic, there was this. It was great because as everyone was shut in, there was this app called Clubhouse.
Yes, yeah, I
Yeah.
joined Clubhouse for a little
Okay.
bit. Yeah, yeah.
It was great. And I met all these people from all over the world, frankly.
Yeah.
And one of the guys that I ended up connecting with was a member of parliament from Canada. His name was Matt Jeaneroux. I think
Okay.
I'm pronouncing it's from Edmonton.
Yeah.
And just a really, really great guy. Is a kind of a pro oil and gas guy, and just we ended up starting this oil and gas club with a couple other folks from
Nice.
around the country on Clubhouse, and we'd have guests on. We had a few members of Congress on and different things like that. But he came on to give a kind of a Canadian perspective, and it was fantastic. He's just a really good guy.
Cool. No, I'll have to check him out. Maybe he's on LinkedIn or something, and
Yeah.
connect. That would be really cool. Yeah, Edmonton's, I you know, Calgary to Edmonton is like what Houston is to Dallas.
Okay.
Calgary is about 3 hours south of Edmonton, similar to Houston, Dallas type of thing. And Edmonton's very heavy, industrialized type of
Hmm.
city. A lot of the oil field companies are based out of Edmonton, and then corporate a lot of times is based out of Calgary. So, but anyway, no, that's really neat. And yeah, Clubhouse was fun. We started a few little, uh I guess, sessions, around energy, and just kind of some buddies and stuff. And then all of a sudden Twitter comes along and rips,
Yeah.
and then and releases Twitter Spaces. So then Clubhouse was like, wah. But I don't know if Clubhouse is still a thing. But talking about the Canadian energy sector, there's a gentleman, Arjun Murti, who's on the board of directors for Conoco, who's got a long track record on a board of advisors for several different companies. But I actually had him on the podcast, and now he has a blog called, I'm gonna, again, memory's not serving me correct today, But anyway, it's a great blog where he talks about energy economics, and real some, science and factual based information. And he's very, very pro Canadian oil and gas, Canadian energy, and thinks that that's going to help, the US and a lot of parts of the world if, given the opportunity. So again, I say that to say this, and again, this is definitely a podcast like, oil and gas is the end all be all. It's, again, I think it's going to take, my stance is it takes everybody, it takes everything, it takes all sorts of forms of technology from
Yeah,
all walks of the energy industry. But the reality is we've built a society on the backbone of fossil fuels. If we're going to continue to evolve, we'll probably need it, and let's make it cleaner, and let's adopt the rest of the technologies and come together and get energy poverty, or get everyone out of energy poverty. And that to me is the North Star. But
I
we have
agree
all
with
this.
you, and
Yeah.
you're exactly right. I mean, and I think that in the world that I'm in, I think that you're going to see a lot of that start to be talked about. My former boss, Congressman Bob Latta from Ohio, he serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and he is there's when it comes to legislating energy policy, there's probably nobody better. And he is, he's very in tune with kind of the energy industry, and I think he'll play a big role in kind of helping, this conversation as it unfolds.
Awesome. No, I love how more and more people are having good, constructive, non sort of divisive type conversations. And so it's coming up close to the hour here, and I certainly want to respect your time, Ryan. But if you had I'm going to take, this is from Tim Ferriss. If anyone listens to Tim Ferriss, you'll know I stole this question. But if you had a billboard or a blimp or something that, everyone's, whether it be in Washington, D.C., down here in Houston, in the U.S., if there was a message that you could put on a board that everyone could see it almost every day, what would that message be?
Well, my message specifically for the energy sector is representation matters. And I keep saying that, I keep harping on it, because you have a lot of the big players, the people who you expect, to have a voice in the process, the oil majors and folks like that. But the real oil and gas industry is the smaller companies, the people who are out in Midland and Odessa and out in the Permian, drilling wells, single wells, small, operations, smaller operations.
Yeah,
And that's the real oil and gas industry. That's whose voice needs to be in this as we continue to talk about this, not just the producers, but the oil field services as well.
absolutely.
And kind of the other industries that feed into that. It's a whole ecosystem, and everyone's voice matters.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a great way to close out on the business front. On the personal side, one last question I always like to ask is, you know, would you have any daily habits or routines? You're clearly, I'm sure politics is, 24/7, 365. You're dealing with the kiddos, everything else. But do you have any sort of daily habits or routines that keep you grounded and charged up to tackle, Capitol Hill?
Yeah, I read the Bible every day.
Nice.
Um, my faith. I'm a person of faith, and I wouldn't be where I am without Jesus.
Wow. I love it, man. That's great. And a big shout out to you and your commitment to that. And again, for everyone out there, thank you so much for joining us today. Ryan, if people are interested in hearing more about whether it's Shoemaker or just some of the stuff that we talked about today, do you have any good resources? What I'll do, I'll put the link in the show notes for your LinkedIn, for Shoemaker. But any other good resources that if people are interested in learning more about what we talked about today?
Yeah, I mean, you can visit our website, shumakeradvisors.com, I believe is it. And then if people just want to get in touch with me, happy to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a
Yeah.
message on LinkedIn, or people can just shoot me an email at rwalker@shumakeradvisors.com.
Awesome. No, that's perfect. I encourage everyone to connect with Ryan over LinkedIn, and you do a good job of posting stuff on LinkedIn and some content. And again, follow along and see all the cool things that Ryan and the rest of his team are doing at Shumaker. And for the listeners, thanks. And always a reminder, please reach out to me if you'd like to sponsor the show. Until next time, always remember that everyone deserves access to energy, and we is greater than me. Thanks, everybody.